Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 4 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll be taking up is related to river interlinking, as a tripartite agreement has been signed between the central government, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan government for the ambitious Eastern Rajasthan Canal project. The second article is related to female labor force participation rate, as the central government has started a survey for increasing the women participation in labor force. The third article is related to internal migration, as women, especially in the working age group, constitute a significant share in the migrant pool. Still there is little debate surrounding them. And the fourth article is related to hybrid electric vehicles, as a research note has emphasized that India must embrace hybrid vehicles on its path to full electrification. Now, the first article is related to river interlinking, as recently a tripartite MOU has been signed between the central government and the governments of Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan for the ambitious Eastern Rajasthan Canal project. So, we will be discussing river interlinking holistically, the advantages of river interlinking, the challenges associated with it, and a few suggestions too. This is important in the papers GS1 and GS3 under the subjects Geography and Environment. So first, let's discuss the core idea of river interlinking. Essentially, river interlinking is to ensure that water is not wasted and it is transferred from the water surplus river basins to the water scarce river basins, essentially transferring water from the perennial Himalayan rivers to the rain-fed peninsular rivers. That is, the Himalayan rivers, they get water throughout the year because of the melting of snow as well as rainfall, whereas that is not the case in the case of peninsular rivers. This will also solve the problems of both Eastern India and Western India, that Eastern India experiences persistent floods, whereas the Western and Southern India, they experience droughts often. Now, this idea of river interlinking goes a long way back. Before independence, it was proposed in 1858 by the British irrigation engineer Sir Arthur Thomas Cotton. After independence also it was proposed by Rao and then Dastur, and finally it took shape in the form of the National Perspective Plan. And finally the National River Interlinking Project came up. Now this National River Linking Project has two components, the Himalayan Rivers component and the Peninsular Rivers component. The Himalayan Rivers component includes making river links for 14 river links, and the Peninsular River links will be made between 16 river links, and this will ensure that water is not wasted. Now if we observe, the Peninsular component includes the Ken-Betwa link also, the Periyar to Vaigai Basin river link also, and the Himalayan component will include the various river linkages, that is Gandak Ghagra and Sarda Yamuna, etc. Now this will ensure that about 3000 water storage reservoirs will also be created and 30 river links will be made. This Eastern Rajasthan Canal project will ensure that water is given to 13 districts in Rajasthan for the purposes of irrigation, for drinking water and for industrial uses, etc. Now let's talk about the advantages of this idea of river interlinking. India experiences a hydrological imbalance. This imbalance in the availability of water is seen both temporally as well as spatially. That is, effectively there are about 28 to 29 days of rainfall in India per year on an average. That is, there is an imbalance, and spatially also there is more rainfall in some regions, particularly the Eastern India, etc., and there is lesser rainfall availability in the Western India, in the Northwest India. To create that perfect equity and to ensure that the hydrological imbalance is cured, river interlinking will help. This will ensure that inland navigation is also improved. That is, if we start using water as a route for transport, it will solve a lot of problems. For example, it will bring down the logistics cost. Like the road transport costs about 2 rupees per kilometer, whereas the water transport costs only 30 paisa per kilometer. Also, it will bring down the pollution as well as the traffic congestion and take off the load from the rail and the road routes. This will improve irrigation. That is about, it has a potential of about 35 million hectares of agricultural land which will get irrigation if the National River Linking Project is fructified. It will ensure power generation too, that is by building reservoirs of water, power can also be generated and the potential is about 34 to 35 gigawatts of power generation. And it will ensure water supply. This water supply will meet the drinking water needs, the irrigation needs, fishing needs, etc. of the water scarce regions. For example, what is supposed to happen by building the Ken-Betwa River Link project, that the Bundelkhand region, the water scarce region of Bundelkhand will be getting water. Now let's discuss the challenges associated with river interlinking as well. One, the plan of river interlinking has not considered the long-term impact of climate change. For example, as per some studies, by 2100, by the end of this century, one-third of the Hindu Kush glaciers would have melted, and then there might be no surplus water left in the Himalayan river basins at all. Then the funds which we would have spent on the river interlinking would go down the drain. And there might be human cost as well, that is land will be required for the river interlinking project, that land will be submerged, and therefore people will have to be displaced, they will have to be rehabilitated, and there will be adverse impact on the livelihoods also. This will cause huge burden, financial burden on the exchequer. In 2001 itself, it was estimated that the cost of river interlinking would be upwards of 5 lakh crores for the entire project in India. Now we can safely assume that it might have doubled or maybe even more. There will be environmental cost too. That is, river interlinking will cause adverse impact on the ecology, on the biodiversity, and if we link two rivers, one of which is more polluted, then the more polluted river will be polluting the lesser polluted river also. And there might be pumping of water which may be needed. For example, the level of the Ken river is about 60 to 70 feet below the Betwa river. We are proposing to transfer water from the Ken river basin to the Betwa river basin. For that, we will have to lift water by 60 to 70 feet, which will require power also, which will be again environmentally polluting. And the large hydropower projects that we are proposing to construct, they might not be viable. That is, we will have to first pump the water to a higher level. After that, they will be able to generate electricity. The power required for pumping may be more than the power which the large hydropower projects will be able to produce. And in future, they might cause flooding also, because we might store water in the large hydropower projects, and then when there is more rainfall, we have to release it suddenly so that the dam remains safe. There will be international cost also. That is, if we transfer water from the Ganga-Brahmaputra basin to the peninsular rivers, there might be lesser water left in the Ganga river basin. For that, Bangladesh will be complaining, we will be antagonizing Bangladesh. Even Nepal and Bhutan will be also having concerns. There might be a political challenge also. For example, the states like Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Sikkim, Assam, etc., they often oppose the ideas of river interlinking as they will be losing out on water. And usually the river course also changes over a period of time. The river course does not remain the same forever. About 100 years it takes for the river to change its course and direction. What if we implement the National River Linking Project now, and after 100 years the river itself changes course? So how can we address this problem? There are a few suggestions. One, we can promote the effective utilization of the existing resources. For example, the effective utilization of groundwater. Agriculture is one of the biggest consumers of the water. That is, irrigation needs more water. Then we can promote drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, micro irrigation techniques, etc., so that the demand is curbed. We can go for groundwater management, that is, we can go for aquifer recharges, we can go for basin level river management, and we can promote the concept of virtual water. Virtual water means that if India is producing more water intensive crops and India is exporting such crops, then India is virtually exporting water. For example, by exporting rice from India, like basmati rice from India, we are virtually exporting water. Rather than that, we can import the water intensive crops. Even if we import wheat, 1 million ton of wheat, we will be saving a lot of water. And we can go for the national waterways project. This will be saving water rather, because only where there is flooding in the rivers, then that water will be transferred. It will improve the navigation also, it will bring down the cost of navigation too, plus there will be zero pumping which will be required in it, unlike the national river interlinking project. Now, the next article is related to women in workforce. The context behind it is that the central government has started a survey on increasing women participation in the workforce. This is important in Indian economy and related issues in GS3. Now, what is labor force participation rate? As per the OECD, it is the ratio between the labor force divided by the total working age population of a country. That is, it is an indicator of the active workforce in a country. When we take into account the labor force participation for women, it is the percentage of women in the working age group who are actively employed or currently seeking employment. Now let's look at the trends of labor force participation rate. In India, of late it has been increasing. As per the labor force participation rate from the periodic labor force survey, till 2020 and 2021, the labor force participation of women had increased to 25%, and the latest data shows that it has increased to 37%. The similar are the figures from the economic survey data also. Now let's look at the trends temporally. Usually what happens, as per a study, the labor force participation rate among women first declines and then again it increases as the economic development of a country happens. The first phase of stagnation is because the women are employed in agriculture and incomes are low, therefore there is a high labor force participation rate. In the second phase, usually there is a decline in the women participation in labor force, because as the economy grows, the household incomes increase and therefore women have the choice not to participate in labor force. At the same time, there is a transition from agriculture towards factory work, and there are some social barriers for women engaging in labor force. Therefore there is a decline in the labor force participation of women. After that, as the education rates of women increase, the education levels increase, there is further participation of women in the white collar jobs, etc. Usually this is the trend which is seen, but this is not the classical case in the case of India. For example, if we compare the southern and the northern India, the labor force participation for the 5 southern states including Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, that is lesser than the 5 northern states including Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, MP, Chhattisgarh, etc. Despite the southern states having better educational levels, better women empowerment indices, etc. Spatially looking also, there is variation in India, and broadly we can say that the labor force participation rate in India has been increasing from 2017-18 onwards, as per both the periodic labor force survey and the economic survey. Now what are the reasons for the low participation of women in the workforce? One, if we observe the case of India, there is a high degree of informalization. As per the ILO reports, more than 90% of women in India are employed in the informal sector where there are low wages. The employment opportunities for women are also less. For example, the Indian economy transitioned from the agriculture to the services. There is the missing manufacturing part, and in the services sector also the opportunities for women is less. There is a glass ceiling effect which is observed. Even the economic survey points out to the same, that there is an immense wage gap between the wages that are paid to men and women, and it is one of the largest wage gaps in the world. There is the concept of pink jobs, that is informally there is gendered occupation. There is a social mindset that women should be employed in some jobs, for example teaching, nursing, gynecology, etc., and the employment of women in the other sectors is not as much. Simultaneously, there is a rise in the household incomes. The average incomes in India have been rising as the economy grows, which leads to further low participation of women because they have the choice not to participate as labor. If you look at the cultural trends in India, we observe that the women are employed more in the domestic chores and they have the responsibility of child care, etc. And because of such family responsibilities, they are not able to participate in the labor force, in the workforce. Plus, there is a trend of educated unemployment which is seen. For example, the gross enrollment ratio in the higher education for women has been increasing, but despite that, there is lower participation in the workforce, and there is a lack of political nudge as well. If you look at the case of the parliament also, there are about only 15% women in Lok Sabha. We have to nudge women to participate, and the example has to be set from the top itself. And if we compare the situation with the world, the average participation rates of women in the workforce is about 47% across the world. In China, it is even higher, whereas in the case of India, only now we are reaching about 37%. Now, why do we need to increase the participation of women in the workforce? One, it will ensure the contribution to economic growth. As per the IMF data, if there is more women participation up to its full potential in the workforce in India, it will contribute to about 27% more GDP growth. There is a feminization of poverty. Usually, if the women are not participating in the workforce, they have lesser decision making authority, they have lesser autonomy, and the poverty is more among women. The social indicators will be improved if the participation of women in workforce is more. For example, there will be improvement across health indicators like infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, etc. And the women will be experiencing the financial independence as well as the rights and the decision making autonomy. This will ensure that India achieves the sustainable development goals, including the SDG 1, which is about eliminating poverty, SDG 5, which is about gender inequality, and SDG 10, which is about reducing inequalities as a whole. Now, what are the steps which the government has taken for improving women participation in the workforce? One, the government came up with the Maternity Benefit Amendment Act 2017, as per which the maternity leaves were increased. They were increased to 26 weeks. Women are allowed to have maternity leave for up to 26 weeks, and crèche facilities will also have to be provided by the employer above a certain number of women employees. And through the Stand Up India scheme, women entrepreneurs are promoted. That is, bank loans are given between 10 lakh rupees to 1 crore rupees to the women entrepreneurs. And through the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act 2013, the government strives to provide a safe workplace for women. And the government also promotes self-help groups. Self-help groups promote the financial independence and the participation of women in the workforce. For example, the Kudumbushri model in Kerala. For example, the Seva Sanginis, they established crèches near the industrial clusters, near the workplace clusters, and that subsequently had positive results and women participated more in jobs. The next article is related to internal migration. The context behind it is that women, especially of the working age, that is from the age of 15 years to 59 years, they comprise a greater share of the migrant pool, but still there is little dialogue surrounding them. This topic is important in GS1 under population and related issues. Now, what is migration first? Migration is essentially a geographic movement of people across a specified boundary. This can be for a permanent residence or a temporary residence. Let's look at the constitutional provisions also, which are there to safeguard the rights of the migrants. One, the Indian Constitution provides the freedom to reside anywhere in India under Article 19, Subclause 1, Subclause E. Anybody can migrate to any part of the country subject to the reasonable restrictions which are contained within Article 19 itself, that is in the interest of general public or for protecting certain scheduled tribes. Also, under Articles 23 and 24, they are provided the rights against exploitation, that is, they can't be subjected to forced labor, begar, slavery, etc. And this is contained in the 7th schedule under the Union List, that is List 1, Entry 81. The interstate migration is contained under Union List. The ILO conventions 143 and 151 are also about the migrations and the migrant people. That is to prevent the abuse of the migrants and to promote equality of opportunity for the migrants, that is contained under the ILO Convention 143. Let's look at the trends of migration in India also. Majorly, the source states include Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, and the destinations of the migrants include Kolkata in West Bengal and Delhi, Mumbai, as well as Gujarat. They are the major destinations. Now, what are the benefits of internal migration in India? Why it is important? One, it ensures that the labor demand and supply, there is a match between it. The gaps are filled through the internal migration. If there is a gap between the skill set which is available, that is taken care of through the internal migration, and we are able to utilize the demographic dividend also. For example, the northern India will keep on experiencing demographic dividend for another 2 decades, whereas there will be receding demographic dividend in the southern states. Sooner there will be replacement levels already. This will ensure that the inequity is addressed. The inequity in wages, for example, the rural wages, they remain stagnant and they do not get enough opportunities. Also, there is only seasonal work which is available in the rural areas, and hence they migrate. And to ensure that the circular migration is also helping India, there is internal migration which is needed. Circular migration means that the migrants, they move to the workplace to another state also, and they alternatively switch to their home state and then they come back. Circular migration forms like the backbone of our economy, as it contributes about 10% to India's GDP. This will improve the quality of life also, because as the incomes increase, as there will be remittances to the source states also from where the migrants belong, there will be better standards of living, better quality of life. These social remittances will also be there. That is, there will be positive social impacts, because the cultures, customs, traditions, languages of the metro cities, of the destination states, of the more developed states will also be there, will also be spread to the source states including UP and Bihar, and it will ensure that India achieves the SDGs, particularly SDG 8, which includes decent work for all and sustainable economic growth. But there are certain challenges related to internal migration which have to be addressed. One, there are concerns related to xenophobia. Essentially, it means that there is hate or there are adverse feelings against the migrants. For example, what is seen in the form of sons of soil doctrine, that is the hate feelings which are there, for example, in Maharashtra, or recently in Bangalore also it was seen, where the people belonging to Northeast, they faced an exodus from Bangalore. There will have to be affordable housing and amenities which will have to be provided to the migrant workers, otherwise they will fall victim to the rental sharks, or they will have to live in the slum areas without even the provision for basic amenities. Political rights which also have to be given, for example, the right to voting. Otherwise, if their voice is not heard in the area where they are living, then they will not be treated like a voter base, and hence their problems may not be resolved. There won't be any political will. Social security and safety will have to be provided to them, because without that there will be a lack of bargaining power. There will be more exploitation, for example, in the form of forced labor or slavery also. There are cultural barriers too, which will have to be taken care of. For example, they come from the source states which have lower developmental indicators. They face issues, for example, in the form of language issues, and there are chances of exploitation also, and they are subject to usually sexual abuse and domestic violence, particularly women. They will have to be addressed. There is an absence of a holistic policy framework. In 2021, Niti Aayog came up with a draft National Migrant Labour Policy, but still there is no holistic policy framework. And also the impact on source areas will also have to be addressed. There might be an adverse impact. For example, it will lead to a feminization of agriculture. That is, the males, they usually migrate towards the destination states, and in the source states only women are left, and mostly they are employed in agriculture. And if men are also migrating, if women are also migrating, it might lead to a dearth of labor which will be available for agriculture. Hence the entire sector of agriculture will be adversely impacted. And it will lead to a demography change also, because who will be left in the source states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar? The people who are either old or child or women, etc., the people who need care, rather, there will be a adverse impact on the demography who is left behind. Now the next article is related to hybrid electric vehicles. The context behind it is that as per a new research note, India must embrace hybrid vehicles over the next decade on the way to full electrification. This is important in GS3, Science and Technology and developments in it. Now first let's talk about the hybrid vehicles. What are hybrid vehicles? Which are various types of electric and hybrid vehicles, and how do they function? There are some which are full hybrid electric vehicles, there are some which are plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and there are some which are battery electric vehicles. Let's look at them. In a full hybrid electric vehicle, there are two sources of power. One is a battery, which provides power to an electric motor, which provides torque to the transmission system. And the another is the gasoline or a fuel like petrol or diesel, which is powering the internal combustion engine, and they are both driving the transmission system. It can be a series hybrid or a parallel hybrid. In this full hybrid electric vehicle, the battery cannot be charged from outside. The battery is charged either when the vehicle is braked, that is through regenerative braking, when the kinetic energy of the vehicle is wasted. To save it from wastage, it is used to charge the battery, or it is charged by the internal combustion engine. Whereas in a plug-in electric vehicle, the battery is not charged by the internal combustion engine. Here also it is similar, that there are two power sources, a battery and a fuel tank. But the battery is charged by plugging it into an external power source. It is charged either through an external power source or through regenerative braking, not by the internal combustion engine. We call it the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Then there are battery electric vehicles which simply contain only a battery and electric motor. There are no internal combustion engines, and the battery is usually charged by using power from an external source. For example, what happens in the case of various cars like Tata Nexon. Then there are some alternative fuel vehicles. For example, the hydrogen fuel is used to recharge the fuel cell, and the fuel cell further gives power to the electric motor in the form of current. Now, the research note says that the hybrid electric vehicles must be embraced, but there are certain challenges regarding it. Let's look at the pros and cons of the hybrid vehicles. The pros of hybrid vehicles include that they can be important in the energy transition process. Yes, for the transition process, good, but for the long term, they might not be as sustainable. They can reduce our use of fossil fuels, because India imports about 80% of its oil, and there will be lesser air pollution, lesser particle pollution including PM 2.5, PM 10, etc., and there will be lesser noise pollution, as the battery vehicles, they are usually silent, and the money which will be saved, which will be impacting our forex reserves also, which will be not impacted adversely. It will ensure higher durability of hybrid cars, and they will be helping down slowing the global warming, and ultimately they will be protecting our natural resources, and we can use the energy quite efficiently, as they are giving a better mileage. For example, the mileage of a hybrid electric vehicle is better than an internal combustion vehicle, a conventional vehicle, and they usually are treated like a status symbol in India. But there are certain cons associated with them. They can only be a temporary solution. They still cause some level of pollution. It is only the electric vehicles which cause minimal pollution to the climate. The high purchase price of hybrid cars is also a detrimental factor in the case of Indian customers, and the technology issues are rather common, because the mechanical as well as electrical linkages in hybrid car are quite complex, and there will be higher maintenance costs. For example, if the battery has to be replaced altogether, then the cost of replacement will be huge, and there is overall performance which might actually be lower in the long run as compared to the conventional cars, and the extra weight of batteries that also reduces fuel efficiency as it is carried by the vehicle, and the battery disposal will create additional waste. There will be a creation of e-waste which will be a problem, and the high voltage batteries, they can be dangerous too, and there will be the limitation upon top speeds as well usually. So in the long run they might not be a sustainable solution. For the transition period, yes, we can go ahead and adopt the hybrid vehicles too. Thank you.